If you ever come across a group of crows gathered in silence around something on the ground, not fighting over it, not feeding from it, just gathered in a loose circle, still and quiet in a way that feels wrong for birds, stop. Watch what happens. What you are witnessing is one of the most studied and least understood behaviors in all of animal cognition. Researchers have been trying to fully explain it for years. What they have found so far is stranger, and in some ways more purposeful, than the word used to describe it implies. They call it a crow funeral. The crows themselves, of course, call it nothing. But what they do in those moments is not grief in any way that maps cleanly onto human experience. It is something more operationally interesting, and in certain specific respects, more unsettling. Here is how a crow funeral typically unfolds. A crow dies, struck by a car, taken by a predator, fallen during a territorial confrontation. Within minutes, crows from the surrounding area begin to arrive. They land nearby. They approach carefully, in stages, testing the safety of the location before moving closer. They cluster around the body, usually in near silence, occasionally breaking into short, specific vocalizations that do not match the standard crow alarm call repertoire. They stay for anywhere from a few minutes to over an hour, depending on circumstances. Then they leave. The behavior was documented and studied systematically by researchers at the University of Washington as part of their broader work on Corvid intelligence. What they found when they began analyzing the gatherings is that they are not grief in any recognizable sense. They are something more operationally specific, and the specificity is what makes it worth understanding. The crows are learning. When a crow in an established territory dies, it represents information. Something in this location, or connected to this location, produced a death. The crows that gather are not mourning the individual in the way humans mourn. They are attending a briefing. They are encoding the circumstances of the death into long-term memory. The location, the visual context, the time of day, and critically, any humans or predators that are present at or near the site when they arrive. The researchers tested this mechanism directly and precisely. They had people carry dead crows through areas populated by wild crow communities, while other people walked through the same areas without carrying anything. In subsequent days and weeks, the people who had carried dead crows were mobbed and scolded by birds in the area. The people who had simply walked through were not. The crows had logged the association. This human, this face, this presence appeared alongside crow death. Treat accordingly. That classification was then transmitted socially. Crows that had not witnessed the original event began responding to the same faces with scolding behavior after learning from the birds that had. The information about which humans were associated with death in their territory spread through the crow community, the way all crow social information spreads, through behavioral signals and specific vocalizations that other crows observe, interpret, and incorporate into their own behavioral records. This is social learning applied directly to mortality. When a crow community loses a member, it does not simply absorb the loss and move forward. It extracts data from the loss and distributes that data to reduce the probability of additional losses. The death becomes case study. The case study becomes shared knowledge. The shared knowledge influences the behavior of every crow in the network that receives it. The silence that characterizes these gatherings is what drew researchers to take them so seriously in the first place. Crows are loud animals. They call constantly: alarm calls, contact calls, territorial calls, food-associated calls, calls that encode specific information about specific types of threats. Silence from a crow is unusual. Sustained silence from a group of crows in a specific location is extremely unusual. And yet during these gatherings, the birds are often quiet, or they produce calls that fall outside the normal cataloged repertoire, sounds that appear to serve a function different from standard crow communication. Sounds that researchers have not yet fully decoded. Some researchers have proposed that these quieter vocalizations serve a role in collective processings, not grief as an emotional state, but something like coordinated recalibration within a social group that has experienced a disruption to its structure. Crows form long-term bonds. They maintain extended family relationships. They cooperate in raising young, in defending territory, in sharing information across years of shared history. The loss of a community member is not an abstraction. It is a gap in a functional structure that those remaining birds rely on every single day. The gathering may serve, in part, to re-establish and reinforce the bonds among those who remain. What happens in the days following a crow funeral is also documented and worth knowing. Crows avoid the area where one of their number died, often for days or weeks afterward. They change their flight paths. They alter their foraging routes to bypass locations that were previously central to their daily movement. The death rewrites the geography of their territory, at least temporarily. The location is flagged in the shared mental map of the community. The flag holds until the community's ongoing monitoring produces enough evidence that the danger has passed. And then, gradually, they return. They test the location, they assess, they update the flag. The map adapts over time. But the memory of what happened there, and the faces of any humans present when it happened, does not fade. Crows are not just watching the living things in their environment. They are learning from the dead ones. Every loss becomes a lesson. Every lesson gets distributed through a community that has developed, over evolutionary time, extraordinary machinery for preserving and transmitting exactly this kind of socially critical information. The next time you come across crows gathered in unusual silence around something on the ground, you are not watching birds behaving strangely. You are watching a community process a loss, extract what it needs to know, and make sure that what it learned survives beyond the moment. They have been doing this for a very long time, longer than anyone was watching them closely enough to realize what they were actually doing.